Hi, Yin.
Hi, Shreya.
It's so good to finally have you on the Women Who Build podcast.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thanks for spending your Friday night with me. You could be doing so many other better things,
Oh
but
well,
we're chatting
thanks
together.
for spending your Friday morning with me. And I know you have been on the other side interviewing people, and I'm so excited to interview you on Women Who Build. So thank you for taking the time.
Of course. Let's get to it.
Yes. So I mean, I would love to know your journey, right? You've been an operator at big companies, you've been in the education space, and now you are at MCJ. So, what led you to climate and MCJ?
Sure. This is I'll give you, since we have time, I'll give you the long version. I
Absolutely.
started my career off in investment banking and then realized you could be good at something and not really enjoy doing it. And then did a hard pivot, went into education, specifically career counseling. And then that was chapter 2 of my career. Chapter 3 was getting into tech. And so I was a career counselor at Duke University out of North Carolina in the States. And uh, decided to try my hand at being a recruiter in tech, and so joined Microsoft 12 13 years ago. And the beauty of working at a big tech company is you can change functions and have that mobility within a like 80,000 person organization at the time. And so did recruiting and then did product marketing and did some evangelism, and then realized, oh, there's a lot I can do in tech, and I'm actually building my skill set as a generalist.
Right.
And then went and did similar things at Google for a few years before jumping into startup world or discovering the startup world, and really jumping in. And I joined the MOOC movement, the massive online open courseware movement, back in early 2012, was an early employee at a company called Coursera, which built a platform to democratize access to post-secondary education, secondary education, post-secondary education, and saw that company grow from about 20 people to 250 when I left. And the company IPO'd a couple of years ago, which is just a really cool story to look back on and know that I was part of. And then after Coursera, went to build Khan Academy's international business, and got to travel to all sorts of interesting places in the world to try to democratize now primary education, so basic literacy, basic numeracy, and got to really see what it took to build a business from the ground up. And in that process, in the 4 years I was there, got married, had 2 young kids, and just realized, as much as I love doing international focused job, it's hard to balance that with family priorities, and that always comes first at the end of the day. And so I decided to take some time off, do some soul searching, and ended up joining Sheryl Sandberg at her family office, working on women, equality in the workplace, building resiliency in the face of hardship. And did that for a couple of years during the pandemic, actually, which was so apropos, given the things that we were working on and how women are impacted in the workplace, and how we were all facing hardship and trying to build resiliency during a hard time for us as a globe. And in that time realized, how do I position the next part? So yeah, in July of 2020, the pandemic was raging, and the California wildfires were also raging. So I was living in the Bay Area at the time, and there was a period of about 2.5, 3 weeks where no one could go outside because the AQI was above 200, which is unusual for the Bay Area, which usually hovers around 50 or less. And so everyone was feeling cabin feverish. And my older daughter, who was 4 at the time, said, "Mommy, I just want to go to the park and play." And this is summertime in California. A kid should be a kid. And so I was like, "Great, we can go to the park, but you have to make me a promise, and you have to wear your respirator mask, and I'll wear mine." And so the 2 of us drive to the park that's near our house. And, she's in her little mask, and then I'm in the matching bigger version of the mask. I'm just sitting there looking at her, and it's hazy and orange. No one else is out. and she's just blissfully playing. And, I had this realization of, like, what the fuck am I working like on anything other than climate, right? Like I should be focusing all my time on climate, because if we're looking at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I've been spending years focused on education and, self-actualization and learning. You can't learn, you can't self-actualize if you don't have clean air to breathe, you don't have dependable food source, you don't have dependable housing, and all of that hinges on climate. And so I have this realization of like, I need to work on climate. I need to, stop whatever I'm doing and just learn the space and figure out how I can best contribute with my skill set. And I should mention that I was in a fortunate position to be able to do that. Not everyone, could be in a position where you could take a couple of months off and try to figure out what you want to do next. And so I did that, and I just call myself a climate sponge. I just want to spend time talking to people, reading books, listening to podcasts, and try to understand the problem space well enough, and then try to understand the solution space and then where I fit. And so that's been my journey. I've already known MCJ as a fund at the time. And, when I was doing my learning, I said, I have like, 40, 50 hours a week that I'm spending on this. 10 hours a week, I want to be actively doing something. And so talked with the team and I said, is there anything I can do for 10 hours a week? And the team said, yeah, you can help us build our community strategy. And I said, oh, I can do that. I've done that many times before in my previous chapters. So happy to help. And honestly, just really quickly fell in love with the MCJ team, and have been a partner here for the past year, and just really enjoying working with people all across the climate economy, yourself included in Ashria, and just have been, just deep diving in and loving it.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I think, I was actually just having a conversation with a friend who said that I want to reinvent myself every 7-8 years. And I don't want to feel in the career, and I think also in personal life. I think one thing, however, is key is to identify what is the common thread here, right? Or what made you realize that you would want to start investing. So, how did you sort of step back and really analyze or reflect on the skills that you had developed to come to a conclusion that, hey, you would want to start investing?
I love that, reinvent yourself every 7 or 8 years. I'm going to start using that because I've always, used the phrase like, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. But reinventing yourself I love it. I love it. The common thread, gosh, I would say, like, if you look at minus the investment banking portion, which does lend itself to an investing skill set, but from the career counseling to the recruiting to doing anything and everything within education, technology, I think the common thread is I love mobility, like giving people mobility with knowledge, and so like the common thread is I've always been of the mindset, like if we can help push more IQ points into an economy and people can start learning wages, then we'll all be better off as a society. And so, with the career counseling, it was like, how do I help this person in this very moment figure out what they want to do with, the next 4 or 5 years of their life after graduating undergrad? With recruiting, it's like, well, how can I help figure out what the best role is for you at, company X? At Coursera was like, cool, how can I help democratize the access to, a Yale course to someone that otherwise wouldn't have access, so that they can gain the knowledge, so that they can become an active participating member of the workforce. At Khan Academy, it was way earlier in the pipeline, but still same kind of playbook. And here with MCJ, we are in the business of enabling more capital to move into the climate economy so that there can be more job creation. We're in the business of helping people who want to transition into climate from outside of climate find the right fit. And so I think that's been the through line.
That's pretty cool. And talking about people outside of climate coming into climate, so you moved from education to climate. I just want to understand, how did you sort of prepare yourself, right? Like, you talked about podcasts, you talk about books, etc. But what did you do in those 3 months with MCJ that really convinced you or prepped you to become a full-time member of the team?
Um, so I want to understand the question. So what did I spend my time doing
Exactly.
to be able to like gain the level of confidence that like, yes, this is what I want to
Yes,
be doing?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it is just self-education. I'm a slow reader. And so I consume information best. And I know this about myself after having, being in this body for 39 years. I consume information best when I hear it from people. And so conversations with founders, with operators in the space,
Yeah.
definitely was high ROI. Listening to podcasts. And then like, of course, like there are some very critical, in my opinion, reading material that everyone should read. So particularly two books, Ministry for the Future, which
Mm.
is a fictional book, although, it kind of feels like nonfiction these days. Kim Stanley Robinson, if you haven't read it, highly recommend. And then the second is How to Avoid a Climate Disaster by Bill Gates. I know many people have found that book to be helpful. And so, ground yourself in understanding the problem space, like how have we gotten to this position, and then that's through kind of the reading, and then in the conversations and listening to the podcast, it was like, oh, well, I am so curious to know why this person who has, clearly very smart, has decided to land on solving this very, very specific problem
Problem.
in the entire climate economy. Like, why that problem,
Crazy.
and being able to understand that that logic, I think, is really helpful. And definitely, I feel like after every conversation I had with a founder, I'm like, oh my god, what they're working on is seriously like the most incredible thing, because you just saw the strength in their conviction and why they believed it so much, and how they can attract people around them to also work on that same problem. And climate is a big beast of a problem to solve from so many different angles, and so you need, you know you need thousands, if not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of smart entrepreneurs who are going to like chip away at this beast of a problem from various angles. And competition is great, and collaboration is great. I think we're kind of, in the early stages of this, climate tech 2.0, or clean tech 2.0, where all the ingredients are finally here in order to build this new climate economy.
Yeah.
I strayed away from your original question, but here we are.
Yeah. No, no, no. It makes a lot of sense. And, increasingly, even in India, we're just seeing that there are communities getting together. I'm literally a part of like 4 or 5 WhatsApp groups that all are, I mean, starting 5 a.m., they start talking climate. And then it doesn't end until midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. It's pretty crazy. And people are doing the hard work to really put together a good, I mean, of course, on the founder side, operator side, definitely a great community, but also on the funder side, because we increasingly realize that it's obviously not going to be an entirely venture game, right? It's going to involve a different set of stakeholders as well. So it's pretty active. People realize that there's a mindset shift as well in India, which is great to see.
Yeah, for sure. I think like, I know, when we talked earlier, you had asked me about why community building is
Yeah,
so important.
yeah.
And I want to give so many props to people in the climate space, people in like new spaces in general, who are saying like, I'm not going to pursue like one specific idea. I just want to convene a lot of smart people together to talk. Like, there's such a
Wow.
power in people, like organizing startup events, organizing, WhatsApp groups, Slack communities, because it's really kind of about uh, sharing knowledge and breaking down knowledge silos. That's so critical, and bringing
Absolutely.
together people that might disagree on things, which is like awesome, right? You want to have that
Yeah.
discourse in building the community anyway. So like, when you think about the end goal being like investing, the end goal being building a startup, the end goal being making and passing policy, all that just hinges on people, and just the more perspectives you can have to be informed, to then like build an idea, to then like push, some policy through at the municipal, provincial, state, government, like federal level, like all the better. And so just, it's about being net givers. When you build a community, like everyone should be giving and everyone should be taking. And so it's kind of how you build that momentum of a flywheel that the community will keep on growing, and like building a center of gravity to pull people in, because we just need all hands on deck.
Absolutely. And then anybody who has worked in climate obviously knows of MCJ Collective, not only in the US, but also I would say around the world, right? Like even
That's really generous of you to say. I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but thank you.
It's totally true. I mean, even in India, when I speak to founders, I hear about MCJ all the time. They actually learn a lot about climate through MCJ and the companies that you invested in and the community in general, which is, I think, key. So what is the thesis at MCJ? What do you guys invest in? And would love to know more about that. And how do you really spend your time?
Yeah. Maybe I can give like a 101 to MCJ. For the very few people who might not know we are definitely working hard at building our ecosystem. So thank you for those kind words. So MCJ, for simplicity's sake, we have a stool that has 3 legs, and for alliteration's sake, it is content, community, and capital. And how we got started, I think, unlike when you think about like a traditional early stage venture fund, we didn't start off as a fund. We started off as a podcast. So MCJ stands for My Climate Journey, and my partner Jason Jacobs, 3 years ago now, he had just exited as a tech entrepreneur, had time and being the fortunate position to think like, well, what do I want to do with my next phase of my career? I care about climate. I don't know too much about climate. Let me talk to smart people. And so those conversations evolved into a podcast, and the listeners of the podcast and then said, we want to be able to work with each other to figure out, solutions that we could possibly build to inform each other of, new pieces of knowledge coming in to the climate space. And so, fast forward 3 years, we have recorded 350-ish episodes, over 1 million downloads across all the episodes. We have three streams of the podcast. One is focused on startup founders, one is focused on kind of general thought leaders in the climate space, and the newest one, which I'll give a plug for myself, is a series on skilled labor workforce. And so not only just focusing on the white collar labor transition, but also the skilled labor blue collar transition, which is so needed. And so that's the content side, how it has evolved. And on the community side, 20 people at the early days, like listening to the podcast, very niche. And now the community has evolved to more than 3,000 people who are, represent 25 countries, entrepreneurs, people transitioning in and wanting to find another job, focused on climate, investors, and, like really heavy hitting thought leaders, scientists, policymakers, kind of, all across the board, electricians, PV installers, just like all gathering together in a very like egalitarian type of way, where it's like leave your ego at the door and come and contribute and learn and connect. And so we haven't gotten to the capital part yet. So you have content and then community. So the capital part of MCJ really evolved out of, us being in this fortunate position to learn about all of the like incredible, sometimes crazy ideas that founders are working on, and thinking like, oh, it might be a really great opportunity for us to really get some skin in the game. And helping support these founders grow. And so we started off a fund that to date has.
Which year was this after the podcast launch?
This is about 2020.
2020. No,
Yeah.
so 2020 was the fund.
Oh, sorry. When did the podcast launch? Is that what you asked?
No, the capital. When did the capital kick in after the
Yeah, it
podcast?
was
3 years after.
Q4 2019, Q1 2020-ish
Oh,
timeframe.
wow. Right.
Yeah, so in the span of, three-ish years, we've invested small checks into early stage companies. So pre-seed, if you like look at the bell curve distribution, the bulk of it is in pre-seed, seed, series A. 70 plus companies, global footprint, a lot of it in North America, some in Europe, and then some outside of Europe. We, recently did some investments in African countries, as well as one in India.
Yeah.
So our footprint is growing, and we are, we're small fund, I would say. We're not the Temaseks of the world. We are early stage, small checks. We don't lead. We are kind of in the business of, like, if you want to brand it something, collaborative, complementary capital, where we just want to help founders. And we oftentimes hear from founders, by the time we get on their cap table, like, they don't need our money. They see the value of the MCJ flywheel, and want us there. And so I find myself in feeling very grateful that we get to be building the climate economy from our little corner.
Absolutely. That's very interesting and inspiring. And the very fact that you were able to identify the opportunity and go after it. And as you said, right, skin in the game, I have started to realize that it's so important to have that, to give not only the founder the level of commitment, or the community around you, but also to yourself, right? Like, how else do you convince yourself that this is something that you would want to commit to the next 5 or 10 or 20 years of your life? So that's incredible. So congratulations on
Thanks.
that.
Thank you. I think the other part of your question, you were asking, like, what's our investment, like, approach or
Approach.
strategy?
Yeah.
Happy to talk about that. So very simply put, the way we see the climate economy is on a graph. So imagine on the x-axis you have, like, moving bits to moving atoms, so like pure software. So you think about carbon accounting as one of many examples, and then just on the other end you have, like, moving atoms, and deep tech, heavy infrastructure, manufacturing, synthetic biology, a lot of physical stuff that you have to have someone in a factory, in a lab, working on and tinkering with.
Right.
And then imagine on the y-axis you have sequestration of GHGs. Like, how do you just suck it out of the air? How do you remove it? And then you have mitigation. How do you stop the faucet of GHGs flowing in? And how do we get off of our dependency on fossil fuels? And then you have this category of, like, it doesn't really matter how much you, like, sequester or mitigate, like, shit is getting hotter, wetter, monsoons, floods, droughts, wildfires. And so how do we as a society build resiliency around the things that we're all experiencing in the weather and the climate? And then lastly, how do you enable more talent and capital to move into the rest of the space? And so if you laid out the MCJ portfolio companies as marbles against that framework, kind of all over the place, and very intentionally so, because our thesis is it needs to all happen, and it needs to all happen together. And there's a lot of opportunities for what companies are doing to be complementary to each other. And you have a company like Terra.do that is focused on helping people build baseline climate knowledge, so that then they can work in the rest of the areas. And you have a lot of VC project finance folks that are trying to get more capital to go into the space. And you have people that are working on policy changes that are also in the enablement camp, that are going to help the home electrification companies move faster, right? And so it's like you want to nourish the entire ecosystem, and so we want to be able to help organizations that have a seat at the table and have a really critical part to play to be able to grow. And so that's how we've seen that's how we've like done filtering for the type of investments that we want to look at and eventually do.
So how do you sort of obviously time is of essence, right, with climate change, and I want to understand, how do you prioritize the models that would make sense at scale versus models that are great, obviously because it's early stage, right? So you really in a way are creating the market, or are, I would say you are the designer of how climate tech or climate change in the longer run would really play out. And so how do you really prioritize, honestly, the models that should win, actually, for us to not feel hot in winters and to not feel cold in the summer?
Yeah, I feel like if you were to ask that question to like, each individual founder, they'll give you like a very clear answer, kind of like how I was feeling when I talked to, each
Yeah.
founder's like, why you and why this type of impact? And so
Yeah.
I think impact could be had on many different levels, but I guess from how we see it, like the criteria for, going after an investment is, I guess, really threefold. One is like looking at the space. Like, is the space ripe for really scalable solutions to be built? And one of my favorite quotes that I feel like I quote to everybody, I've probably quoted this to you in the past when we chatted, is this guy named Andrew McAfee. I'm like, where is the quote? I should have it memorized, but I don't.
Yeah.
So he wrote this book called More from Less, and just basically like, after industrialization, how has the states
I actually read
been
it.
able to.
It's a good
You
one.
did.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for reading it. That's awesome. Not many people have heard of it, at least in the people, the circles I've talked to. And so
I'm
I
always
feel like
looking for productivity now. Now that I'm hitting my 30s in the next 2 years, just looking for ways to be productive and efficient.
I'm hitting 40s in my next 2 years. I feel the same. So McAfee has his book and his quote, and he says that the four horsemen of the optimist is, you have capitalism, tech progress / innovation, responsive government, and public awareness. And so I think like those factors lend itself to like the space of the problem that someone is solving. And so like we look at, is there like tech progress and really interesting innovations to say like solve for home electrification? And is there money being poured into the space? And most importantly, I think, is there like responsive government? So aka, is there policy that is being shaped to help, this particular space move along faster? And like, are people aware of all these things that are happening? And so we look at the space, right? And we look at then we look at the team of people. Are these is this team of people the like undeniably like best people to work on solving this problem? Like, do they have a diverse set of technical business backgrounds? And like if a company is really focused on technology at first, then you really want like technically prowessed founders.
Right.
And then are they going to bring people in who can work on the business, work on the policy side, to be able to really move the needle on solving this problem and being able to scale faster? So team, like, can they execute? And then can they come up with a business model within the space that they're in? And I think like when you have a lot of people coming at you with pitches, you choose between the good teams by seeing who has the best addressable market and the best plan to be able to tackle. So I think that's the lens to look through. And like, tactically, what does that mean? That means like looking at a team, can they dependably hit milestones, right? Like when they come to you, what have they done in the past? What have they said they've wanted to do? Where are they at now? Like how well they're building on the business objectives. Are they making the right connections within, government? Are they making the right connections within potential partners? And are they doing customer discovery in a really like deep and knowledgeable way? how are they prioritizing hiring people? Are they hiring a diverse team? One of the biggest like red flags I see is like a homogenous team. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, will that team evolve to be diverse, not only in, the way that people, the way that people represent themselves, but also in skill set. Because at the end of the day, it comes kind of back to like people and moving IQ points. You really like, I think the number one indicator of success is talent, gravity, and magnetism. Like if a
That's a good
team
one.
can really attract good people, then that is gonna make or break them from the rest of the pack. And I wish I could take credit for that. Ian Roundtree at Cantos actually kind of said that to me once. I was like, oh yeah, no, like that's key. That's key. Because
Absolutely. And I think in any industry though, of course, I mean, climate, however, is new. So I'm actually curious, so when a company is at pre-seed stage, right? Because you invest in pre-seed as well, and the founder is nowhere related to climate. So how do you sort of, or do you not get people who are only like a 2 or 3 member team? Because how do you then assess if the founder is the best person to execute because he's totally new to climate? What are the data points that you look at? Maybe it's a paper concept as well, right? So what do you do? How do you really get that conviction?
I would say he or she.
Yes.
We need,
Sorry.
yeah. I'm just kidding. I mean, I know how much we both prioritize diversity. It's just that, it's interesting because it's like, it sometimes feels like there's.
Well, that's a good one. Good you pointed out, because I usually do he and she, but
yeah. So yeah, to answer that question, I mean, like there are just at the end of the day, you want a smart people who knows the problem space well, even if they don't come from a climate background. Like good example is I won't say names. There's a founder who comes from pure software background. I don't want to say the name because they're in stealth, but they like really wanted to focus on heat pumps and home electrification. And so like how do you bridge that gap? You surround yourself with people that are in the business, people that understand the policy implications of the Inflation Reduction Act. Trying to figure out like what niche do I want to disrupt in this arena? Am I going to go build heat pumps? Maybe so. If so, then surround yourself with people that are that have the ability to be able to do that. Like smart mechanical engineers. Maybe they're co-founder, maybe they're early employee, or I just want to build software that is going to make home electrification process easier. Is it for the installers at the end of the day? Is it for the consumers? And so like, I think, you don't have to have climate knowledge to build on an idea. You need to really understand the problem space deeply and know how you're well positioned enough to solve that particular part of the problem, and then surround yourselves with people who can solve the parts of the problem that you are not able to. And so I love it when I can, what do I see founding teams where there's the kind of like the technology know-how and then the business know-how, and it also depends on like what you're trying to build. Again, if you're trying to build a new DAC company, I don't know if you need like a business person to start off with. You need someone who knows how to really build the technology piece first and foremost, and then bring in that business knowledge once the market is more once you have the technology roadmap really clearly laid out. I that's one person's opinion. You can slice and dice it in many ways. I think in the end of the day, you need to have people that like understand the space deeply, and have a clear path to solving.
So you have 3,000 community members, right? And so I also know that you're great at community building. and that you put the best teams together. So you obviously built communities not only in climate but elsewhere. I mean, in your career, in your past career as well. What do you think really is key to great matchmaking, great team matchmaking? What works? What is this one consistent thing or common thread that you may have noticed that
Oh
just
my God,
clicks?
I've never been asked that question before. Ooh, what do I think? I mean, I feel like nothing I'm going to say is going to be mind blowing. So if you're looking for a
I
like,
mean,
aha,
absolutely.
you're probably not going to get it.
No, if you have an
I
example, maybe if you have an example of a company that you think, you did a great job with putting the team together and what worked with that company. I think that'll be
hmm,
so cool.
um, I don't think I'm not going to answer that question because I feel like there's so many components that go into like a matchmaking. It's just to say like, oh, I made this happen. I wouldn't want to. I don't want to take like credit for something that was much more complex to put together. But I will say, within community, like if and it's not just like co-founder meeting co-founder. It's
Right.
like co-founder meeting advisor,
Mm.
investor meeting a founder, and just like what makes it click. I think it's like one shared vision for the problem space. Like
Right.
both people see the importance of working on this problem now, not like sometimes just in future. Now like the urgency
Yeah.
is shared and is there. And then secondly, I think there's a mutual respect for understanding how the other person thinks that is different from the way you think.
Mm.
I think a an immature founder may look for someone who thinks exactly like them, and I think a mature founder will look for people that can that kind of complement where they are more vulnerable and they are less prowessed. And so I think that's just a really interesting observation that I've seen. Surround yourself with people who are smarter than you,
Yeah.
from both ends. And I think similar work ethic. If you're gonna, be in a long-term relationship together, whether that's an investor to a company, an advisor to a company, company with each other, do you share the same kind of values in building something and spending, like 40 to 80 hours a week,
Yeah.
building something together? That shared, work ethic is key as well.
Right. It's so interesting that all the points that you just mentioned are also applicable to a marriage, a successful marriage. Because, it's so interesting. So I was speaking to a mentor of mine, and he said that if you want to find a great guy for yourself, I think the question that you both should be asking is that, do we want to get married to this person right now? And
Mm, mm.
this person, right? So that's key. So since you mentioned, do we want to solve this problem right now? Maybe. Maybe it's
Yeah,
both.
oh my gosh. Ooh, I like it. I like the insight that I unintentionally brought. Yeah, I think it is a marriage. Like,
It-
this is something that you're gonna work on for the next, hopefully many years. And no marriage is perfect, and sometimes marriages don't last, but for the next, like X number of years where you're like hand in hand doing something together, like it is important to have a solid foundation that you're building a
yeah,
relationship and a company on.
right. How are you thinking about an employer's P&L and priorities in the US when it comes to climate change? And is B2B2C, where C is the employee, really a model that can work out in climate, very similar to healthcare?
Yeah, and I'm curious to get your take too on the Indian market, what you're seeing in the US. I mean, this is an N of one opinion in that, we've seen companies being built to target exactly this. When you have more and more employees that have clear net zero goals or clear sustainability goals, and you now have carbon accounting software that is popping up, and you have SEC regulations that is going to make it more and more clear of that an employer has to track and measure footprint, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. I think the B2B2C model does lend itself to having traction, because if imagine you have a 500 company and you have a bunch of employees who are traveling and who are working from home and generating not scope 1 but scope 2 footprints. And so how do you track that? I think there's opportunities for companies to help these F500s, F100s, maybe one day smaller companies to be able to more effectively figure out their footprint.
And
what's it like?
Sorry, you were saying.
I was going to ask you about the Indian market and what you see, and in asking that question, I'm like, oh, I wonder what the diff is.
Yeah, so in Indian markets, definitely like the bigger corporates have definitely come up with their net zero goals, and they are doing anything and everything to be able to facilitate that. So the likes of like Reliance, Adani, Godrej, and the likes. Godrej, for example, has anyway been very, very progressive when it comes to that. I think they started doing it even before clean tech became cool. Right. And so there's definitely something in when it comes to large corporates. But when it comes to like mid-sized or smaller firms, there's no compliance that really pushes them to do so. So I'm sure it's only a matter of time, because as we've seen, I always give this example because we've seen during COVID, right, as the government mandated a few things such as wearing your mask. You really did that even when you were inside the car, right? And so I'm sure things are going to change, and people will really like not only just because it's mandated by the government, but I think people in general or companies in general, when they see the importance of doing these things, would start doing by themselves. But that behavioral change will definitely take some time, for sure. But we'll get there. You moved to Canada recently from the Bay Area. And we see teams getting dispersed, right? Like so many of them have offices in New York and then the Bay Area, or sometimes in Miami. So how do people really build their ecosystems? And specifically so as a venture investor, right? How do you build your ecosystem? How do you find the best company? How do you do what you're anyway wanting to do as a remote person?
Yeah, I think the COVID has obviously shifted how we think about work norms. For VC companies, like innovation is everywhere. It's like, yes, there are more volumes of people and closer to centers of gravities where you find maybe universities like the Bay Area, and you have Boston as two obvious places where you see a lot of startups. But Austin is a growing hub. Denver is a growing hub. This is a very like US specific answer. Actually, North America specific answer. Vancouver is a growing hub. Toronto is a growing hub. And so having a remote team, I think you have the advantage of being kind of geographically close to different hotspots, and to be able to be close to founders in a particular region. So like I in a day can drive to Seattle, anywhere in the Pacific Northwest, and visit companies in our portfolio or companies that might be interesting. My partners who are based in LA and San Diego and Boston, can do the same and take a short flight if needed. And so I think it's good to have a more like a beyond US centric footprint, just so you can be in the know of communities that are popping up and working on innovations that might be outside of, a backyard that you might have known for a long time.
Absolutely. One last question, if you have the time, which
Yeah.
is what inspires you?
I mean, like, people. I feel like that's a cop out answer, but it is true. Like, I get so energized when I talk to people who want to enter into the climate space from like all parts. Like yesterday, I talked to a formerly incarcerated a person who is now a firefighter, right? And he's working on getting more firefighters in the space. And talking to you, a fellow investor from halfway around the world this morning for me. On a completely different topic. And then later today, I have, a conversation set up with community members, some of whom are just entering into the climate space after being laid off. So it's like,
Oh,
it's
wow.
just like being surrounded by people who are all energized and want to solve this problem at this like moment in our Earth's history is what just like keeps me so engaged and excited to do the work that I do, that we do, that we all should be doing.
Yeah. No, that's great. And it's quite similar for me as well. But thank you so much for taking the time. It's been lovely chatting with you and just getting to know you. You're super cool.
Oh, thank you, Shreya. Pleasure is all mine. And I'm so glad we had this chance to chat.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.